Welcome to episode 1, Janie's Journey. And Janie's journey in the revelation of God is a profound exploration for her quest of self-discovery, independence, and a meaningful sense of identity. And there are a lot of key points in this with a lot of evidence. And our first key point is Janie's early life and her marriages. And Janie is introduced as a young girl, maybe 15 or 16, living with Danny. And she used to be a slave, but now she has her own house and is an independent queen. And she marries Logan Killicks because of Nanny. Nanny wants Janie to have that independence. She wants her to have stability. She wants her to have money. Logan is rich. So Nanny goes and urges Janie to marry him, and Janie marries him. But Janie feels cramped and stifled and is unhappy because of this marriage.
Because she doesn't feel loved, and it's like a loveless marriage, essentially.
Exactly.
Also, Janie was given the wrong idea of what marriage should and shouldn't be by Nanny, and also by her being young and believing that marriage is true love.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now she tells Logan that she's gonna leave, and then she leaves him, and she goes and marries Joe. Joe, she's hopeful about this new marriage with Joe, but right. Joe is a bad guy. He beats her, he hits her, he's controlling and dominant, and Janie is oppressed and satisfied with the relationship.
This is due to Joe being a really powerful guy. He tries to get a big role as a mayor, and he's just very ambitious in that way.
And he uses her as a stepping stone, just to get up in places of power.
Right. He oppresses her in so many different ways. Just does not give her any hope about this relationship / marriage at all. Basically, he dangled a carrot in front of her face, and then the second they got married, she was like, never mind. Nuh-uh.
And then Janie, after that, Joe dies. Joe, we don't like Joe. And she goes and gets with Tea-Cake. Tea-Cake is a younger man, way younger. And they fall in love. They love each other. Tea-Cake is cool. I love Tea-Cake, personally. And then the relationship is really characterized by mutual respect, love, and Janie's newfound sense of freedom. Because Logan, he lets her speak. He teaches her how to play checkers.
Logan doesn't do that. Tea-Cake does.
Exactly, Tea-Cake does. I'm talking
you just
about
said
Tea-Cake.
Logan.
It's okay.
It doesn't matter. Anyways, Logan, Tea-Cake, it doesn't matter. Because Logan was rich, but Tea-Cake was a good guy.
Tea-Cake is just better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even though Tea-Cake is really more poor than Joe, Janie's still rich, so she has that money somewhat.
But we see Tea-Cake have this love for money, and we see how it affects him, and we see how it causes a strain in their relationship.
Yeah, and steals their money the first day, and go out to gamble, but it's I beat up this person for you, so it's better. But then tragedy strikes, and there's a hurricane. Tea-Cake dies because he gets bitten by a dog,
and he gets rabies.
Mm. And then Janie returns to Edenville after Tea-Cake's death, and then that's the whole book. She is retelling her story to Phoebe, but now she's a changed woman, confident in her own identities, and is no longer bound by societal expectations. Mm-hmm. And what do you think are key turning points or moments in Janie's life that have a profound impact on her sense of self and identity?
I definitely think the realization under the pear tree is a big one, because this is her call to action, and it leads her to going down the path she goes on, and it's a motivation to her behavior. And
personally, I feel Joe's death is also a pretty big one too, because now she's finally free of his oppression and can explore her own identity and have her desires freely.
I also feel the last one I want to mention, since we're talking about motifs, is the horizon. At the beginning of the novel, it's super open. She wants to meet all these people, but as she returns to Edenville, it's not there anymore, because Tea-Cake's dead. She found the love that she wanted. She doesn't need her horizon to be super open anymore.
Yeah, I feel the blossoming spring is also a really big symbol and motif of mm-hmm. Janie's personal growth and self-realization,
right.
And her discovery of her own desires. Mm-hmm. And her epiphany under the pear tree is a really big turning point in the novel. And as the spring blossoms and grows and things grow, Janie flourishes and grows and embraces her own inner desires and passions.
Her hair is also really important, as it symbolizes how free she is and who's under control of her. Because when she's by herself, she's able to let her hair free, but when she was with Joe, he forced her to tie her hair out.
Mm-hmm.
I feel Janie's final leaving Edenville and returning to her hometown, and her perspective on life and the role of men in her life changes, because she now realizes that she's an independent woman. She is a queen, and she is now a self-assured woman. And even though she had 3 marriages, these 3 marriages have been stepping stones and learning points for her, because now she has her own identity and her own desires, and she is not bound by anyone. And like also, she rejects these traditional gender norms because she returns to her hometown with no man by her side. She doesn't need a man.
She's like all alone, independent.
Exactly. And like I don't know how she's alone like this because she only has $900 in the bank.
Yes, and also the Horizon motif comes like full circle as it's the first thing we're introduced to, and it's also the last thing that we see with her talking to Phoebe.
Right.
Exactly.
Like when she takes the net and like grabs her Horizon to close it in, it really signifies how she's gotten what she's needed and what she's wanted throughout the
It shows how
novel.
her journey's like.
Yeah.
Right.
Like all in all, I feel like her return, like it marks like the ending for her quest and fulfillment and her realization that happiness is not dependent on men or societal expectations. And she has evolved into a woman who values her own identity and is willing to embrace her independence and pursue her happiness on her own terms. And this final decision is a testament to her growth and resilience throughout the novel. Thank you.
This is episode 2, Character Confessions. Throughout Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, we follow the characters through Janie's flashback and we learn about their motivations, beliefs, and behavior. Today we're here to interview 4 of the main characters to discover more about their insights. I'll be starting with Nanny Crawford. So Nanny, what factors in someone's life do you believe affect their opportunities? Well, I believe their backgrounds and their roles in the world affect them. Being born into slavery sadly made me very aware of the dangers in the world. I had to sacrifice a lot for myself and for my daughter, which left me with a very small window of opportunity. Luckily, I was able to work hard enough and escape and build me and my daughter a comfortable life until my daughter sadly fell into the hands of abuse. After that, I raised Janie as my own. Thousands of factors in our lives affect our paths, but some people are pushed off course much more than others. Some people get the luxury of their dreams coming for them, while other people must chase after them. Thank you for your perspective, Nanny. Next, I'd like to interview Virgil Woods, aka Tea Cake. So, Tea Cake, do you have any regrets in your life, whether that be with your relationship with Janie, your overall social life, or your economic life? In the case of Janie, I'm sure I could have done some better things. For example, the first nights we moved in with the Everglades, I remember that I borrowed some of her money. I ended up paying her back, but she wasn't too happy about it. That way I paid her back was through gambling, and that same night I had a bit of an issue with one of the men I was gambling with. I ended up taking his life. And I realized that these actions are inexcusable, but we need to understand that serious problems need to have serious solutions. Also, this reminds me of the time Mrs. Turner and her brother moved in, and I had to push Janie around just to prove to everyone that she's mine. Overall, none of these conflicts were about me hurting Janie or hurting others, but they were more about me proving my presence and proving the value of money. Alright, thank you for your time. That's it with these 2 interviews. We'll move on to the rest.
So, Janie, how has your perspective on marriage and what it is and is not changed throughout your life? Well, since I was young, I've always dreamed of finding true love. And at that time, true love meant marriage. My dream suddenly vanished when my first husband, Logan Killix, was introduced into my life. Yes, he was reliable, but he wasn't lovable. Our marriage was completely loveless, and no matter what, I kept looking towards the horizon and marching towards my dream of finding true love. Soon enough, I found myself with a man named Joe Starks. He was almost everything that Logan Killix wasn't. Adventurous, unpredictable, and ambitious. We moved to Eatonville, and as soon after we settled into Eatonville, I began to realize that Joe's dominance in my life was not love. Our marriage grew to be toxic, however his liver was more toxic. After the death of my late husband, I knew my time to fulfill my dream was running out. I later on met a man named Tea Cake. Tea Cake was my soulmate. He was my dream. It was true love. Everybody speculated that Tea Cake wanted something from me, and I knew he wasn't perfect, but he treated me as his equal, which is something I had never had before. Through Tea Cake, I learned that marriage is not about using each other, whether that be for stability or power, but it's truly about love, like I always knew and wanted.
So we're here with Joe Starks, and we're just going to be having a little interview to ask a couple questions, So my first question for you, Mr. Joe, is how do people cover up their insecurities? Well, I wouldn't know, because I don't have any insecurities. The only flaw I have is Janie. When I moved to Eatonville, I had a plan, and as the mayor, I greatly improved the community, from the shop to the mail stand and to the lamppost. This town needed me. Janie was my burden. She was my insecurity, so I had to silence her voice That's how I did it. Oh, that's not the best way, but that's how you did it. Okay, so my next question, Mr. Joe. Why do people cover up their insecurities? I don't know why people will cover up their insecurities. Like, Janie tries saying that I'm old, I look like the change of life, but I have money, and she only has $900 in the bank. So, I'm better, and I don't even know why people need to cover up their insecurities. Just be better. And my last question for you, Mr. Joe, is in what ways are class divides in power toxic? I wouldn't really know how they're toxic because I think that all class divides in power is good. It helps the economy. I feel like with class divides in power, you can get respect and you can get money. And you can get treated fairly too. From your work, you can see the fruits of your labors. Okay, thank you, Mr. Joe.
Their As We're Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston is an elaborate novel that explores many different themes. Some of these themes include a struggle for independence, searching for identity, how love impacts your identity, and many more. This novel is still relevant today as it explores universal themes. This would mean that it allows readers from different backgrounds and different time periods to emotionally connect to the novel.
Janie's search for her identity and personal freedom is a very important part of this novel. Janie's search for her identity involves dealing with her racial identity, her gender identity, and finding herself in a society where women aren't valued as much as they need to be. Essentially, she's trying to find her voice in a time where her voice isn't valued. As a black woman living in the South of the United States in the 1930s, Janie struggles with the many parts of her identity that can mirror the experiences of what happens to black women currently. Janie also enters a relationship with Tea Cake that goes against the social norms of the time. Although Janie has been married twice, to both her husbands she has left, and they were both essentially rich. When Janie enters a relationship with Tea Cake, she challenges the social norms placed upon her. Tea Cake isn't rich, and this is taboo considering that Janie has a lot of money in comparison to him. However, this also helps highlight how Janie eventually comes to the realization that she has her own freedom to choose her own love, the same way that a lot of people do now. A contemporary issue that could relate to this could be the LGBTQ plus rights, being able to get married to whoever you want without any necessary restrictions on race, social class, or etc., which is not something that Janie battles with ever since she made Tea Cake until the end of the novel.
Now we're going to dive deep into my personal reactions to the novel. And this novel brought me a lot of, turmoil. But the first thing that I would like to get into is the first thing that shocked me throughout the novel, which was Nanny's death. I knew she had to die just because of the fact that she was so prevalent in the first two chapters, and considering she shelters Janie, she almost acts like her mentor, so to me it was almost evident that she was going to die. But what I didn't expect was her to die so quickly and of natural causes. For some reason, when I first started reading, I thought that Janie was going to end up killing her or something like that. The chapters in the novel contain so much information that it's almost impossible to skip a chapter and know what's going on in the next one, but I didn't expect for her to die in chapter 3, especially because it hadn't been that long since Janie married Logan. I think it's mentioned that it was only about a month after she married Logan that Nanny dies. The next thing I would like to talk about is colorism in the novel. Now, as a person of color myself, I have read a lot of books on how colorism and internalized racism affects people of color and specifically women of color. I have no doubt in my mind that Their Eyes Are Watching God has one of the best chapters on colorism and internalized racism that I have ever read. It is one of the best portrayals of internalized racism in one of its most evident forms. Mrs. Turner's animosity towards people darker than her and her immense affinity for those lighter than her are portrayed so realistically that it's almost shocking. Just because I feel like I've met so many people like her that although it's not super evident like Mrs. Turner, it's definitely evident, the colorism and the internalized racism.